A homeless girl found a millionaire's wallet, and when she returned it, he did something incredible. The rain had just stopped, leaving the streets of downtown Los Angeles slick and glistening like oil on glass. Neon signs buzzed back to life above shuttered storefronts, and the traffic lights blinked over empty intersections, indifferent to the quiet struggle unfolding on the sidewalk. She was sitting cross-legged near the corner of 6th and Hill, barely 21, with dirt-smudged jeans, a backpack tucked protectively against her chest, and a face that still startled strangers. The kind of beauty that wasn't polished or practiced, just unmissable, even under the layers of city dust. Her name was Claire. She had been homeless for 4 months. She didn't beg. Didn't speak unless she had to. Most people passed her by without looking. But that night, as she adjusted the strap of her backpack and rose to find a dry place to sleep, her foot nudged something near the storm drain. It was a wallet. Black leather. Slightly worn, but unmistakably expensive. She hesitated, glanced around, then crouched and picked it up. Inside were 4 platinum cards, a folded receipt from a private jet charter, and a driver's license that made her pause. Henry Lowell, 42. CEO of Lowell Partners, a name she'd seen once on a billboard downtown, and again on a brochure someone left on a bus stop bench. Real estate investment. Net worth? She had no idea. But it didn't matter. There was no cash. Just a business card, thick as cardboard, engraved with a single phone number. She held it for a moment, considering. Her stomach ached with hunger. She could disappear. Use the cards, sell the wallet. No one would ever find her. But she didn't. She walked half a mile to a gas station, borrowed the clerk's phone, and called. The voice that answered was sharp, distracted. Henry Lowell. Claire hesitated. Then, in a tone so soft it almost trembled, she said, "I found your wallet." There was a pause. "Where are you?" he asked, voice suddenly focused. "By 6th and Hill. Across from the old Western Bank. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He came in 8. A black town car pulled up. The door opened, and a man stepped out in a gray wool coat and Italian shoes. His eyes met hers, and something in his face shifted. Surprise, perhaps. Or something quieter. Guilt, maybe. "You called about my wallet?" he asked. Claire held it out wordlessly. He took it. Flipped it open. Everything was still there. But he wasn't looking at the wallet anymore. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. "You homeless?" he asked next. She gave a nod barely perceptible. He studied her for a long moment, then said, "Get in. Just for a minute." Claire stared at him. At the car. At the open door. And then, with a kind of quiet defiance, she shook her head. "I don't get in strangers' cars." He nodded slowly. Then reached into his coat, pulled out a business card, and handed it to her. "Henry Lowell. That's my direct number. If you ever want to get off this street, call." Then he left. Claire watched the car disappear into the blur of wet pavement and taillights. Her fingers tightened on the card. She didn't know then how that single choice, returning a stranger's wallet, would unravel everything she thought she understood about men like him. About men like herself. But it had begun. Claire didn't call the number. Not the next day, not the day after. She tucked the card into the inner seam of her backpack, wrapped in a Ziploc bag to keep it dry. She told herself she didn't need it. Didn't want it. She'd survived this long on her own. Besides, people like Henry Lowell didn't offer help without expecting something in return. Still, his face stayed in her mind. He hadn't looked at her with pity. Not quite. It had been something else, an odd mix of curiosity and calculation. Like a man trying to solve a puzzle that had landed, unexpectedly, at his feet. By the 5th day, the rain returned. Her usual alley behind the Thai restaurant was blocked by construction debris, and a cop had shaken her out of a bus shelter an hour after midnight. By morning, she was cold, soaked through, and limping from where her boot had finally given out. She ducked into a laundromat just to get dry, and for the first time, pulled out the card. Her fingers hovered over the keypad of the public phone. Then she dialed. A pause. Then, Henry Lowell. It's Claire. Another pause. Where are you? She didn't answer right away. Still downtown. I'll send a car. Don't. Her voice was firm. I'll come to you. He gave an address. Beverly Hills. A marble building with a concierge desk and private elevators. Claire arrived 20 minutes later, after riding 2 buses and walking 7 blocks in borrowed shoes. She could feel the security guard's eyes follow her as she entered the lobby, dripping wet, hugging her backpack to her chest like a lifeline. A woman in a black suit appeared almost instantly, speaking into a discreet earpiece. Miss Claire, Mr. Lowell is expecting you. She was led to the 30th floor. His office was massive. Walls of glass, polished concrete floors, modern furniture arranged with mathematical precision. He stood as she entered, no coat this time. Just a tailored shirt, sleeves rolled, expression unreadable. You made it, he said. I'm not here for a handout, she replied. I didn't offer one. A silence fell between them. The kind that crackled with something unspoken. Finally, he motioned to the seat across from him. She remained standing. I Googled you, he said. Or tried to. You don't exist. She shrugged. No ID. No address. Makes it harder. He studied her. How long have you been on the street? Claire hesitated. Since August. That's 5 months. 6, almost. He leaned back. You ever worked before? Yes. Where? Does it matter? She asked. To me, yes. She looked down at her hands. Cafes. A warehouse in Riverside. A vet clinic before that. Why'd you leave? She met his gaze. You ever had a boss grab your wrist hard enough to bruise it? He didn't blink. Yes. That surprised her. She blinked, then looked away. He rose, walked to the window, and looked out at the city like it was a chessboard. Then, without turning, he said, You're not stupid. You're not helpless. And I don't think you're a liar. Which means one of 2 things. You're either running from something, or you've given up. I haven't given up, Claire said quietly. He turned. Then don't act like it. She stiffened. I'm offering you a job, he said. Not charity. Not pity. A job. Entry-level admin. You'll start in a temp role. Someone quits every month. You'll blend in. You'll earn your place. Claire shook her head. Why? Because I trust people who return wallets more than people with MBAs. And if I screw up? Then you're fired. Like anyone else. She stared at him, heart pounding. I'll think about it, she said. Don't take too long. He handed her a sealed envelope. She didn't open it until she was back on the bus. Inside was a prepaid phone, a company badge under the name Claire M. Avery, and a one-day pass to the Lowell Partners building with a start date circled in red, Monday. It was Friday. That weekend, she checked into a $25 a night hostel in Koreatown. She used what little money she had to buy a clean shirt, slacks from a donation bin, and a battered pair of loafers from a thrift store. On Sunday night, she cut her own hair in the hostel bathroom, staring at her reflection with a mixture of fear and defiance. Monday morning, Claire Avery walked into Lowell Partners for the first time. And no one looked twice. She was just another temp, another name on the schedule. She kept her head down, her voice even, her work meticulous. And when Henry Lowell passed by her desk on Wednesday, he didn't say a word. Just glanced once and kept walking. He never treated her like a project. That was the strangest part. He didn't hover. Didn't check in. Weeks passed. Then a month. She was offered a permanent role in accounts. 3 months later, a promotion to project assistant. By then, she had her own place in Echo Park, a shared studio with a locking door and running water. She still showered in the dark and kept a screwdriver under her mattress, but she was learning how to breathe again. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her from across the conference room. Not in a way that made her shrink, but as if he saw something others didn't. As if he remembered what she looked like, soaked, exhausted, and silent, standing in his office without a trace of fear. By the end of her 6th month at Lowell Partners, Claire had learned 3 important things. 1. Corporate loyalty is often performative. 2. Silence could be its own armor. 3. Henry Lowell rarely made mistakes, but when he did, he never apologized for them. She hadn't spoken to him directly since her first week. Not a single one-on-one meeting, no lunches, no sudden mentorship. He remained exactly what he promised, distant, professional, hands-off. And still, she felt his presence like a pressure in the room. He wasn't just the CEO. He was a force field. Every conversation shifted when he entered. Voices softened. Postures straightened. Even the most senior partners waited for him to speak first. And yet, he never looked at Claire the way they all looked at him. He didn't perform admiration. He didn't flirt. He didn't praise. His attention, when it came, was more like surveillance, clinical, calculating, brief. It was in that context, weeks of calm, quiet, controlled distance, that she got the email. Subject: review. 9:30 a.m., my office. HL. She stared at it longer than she should have. When she arrived, he was already standing, 2 mugs of coffee cooling on the corner of his desk. One black, the other with oat milk. She didn't remember ever telling him how she took her coffee. Maybe she had weeks ago. Maybe he just noticed things. Sit, he said. She did. Straight-backed. Guarded. He slid a folder across the desk. The civic property in Silver Lake. You handled 3 departments' logistics last week. No one flagged a single delay. I was just filling gaps. You did more than that. She said nothing. She never knew where the compliments would lead. You could run a team, he added. She blinked. I'm not asking for that. I know. He stood and crossed to the window, where morning light spilled like silk across the floor. You remember when I asked if you were running from something? I remember. Are you? Claire took a slow breath. Yes. His silence invited her to go on. I was 17 when I left. My mother drank. My stepfather didn't like being told no. I stayed 2 more years after I aged out of foster care because I didn't have a choice. Then I ran. And once you start running, it's hard to stop. Even when the danger's gone. Henry's back remained turned. He said nothing. No soft murmur of sympathy. No awkward change of subject. Finally, he spoke. Why tell me? Because you asked? And because I don't owe you fear. He turned. Something shifted behind his eyes. A glimmer, respect maybe? Or recognition. You could be the director of project development by next year, he said quietly. The board wouldn't blink. They'd think I'm promoting the latest Ivy recruit who happens to be good with numbers. She laughed once dryly. I don't want your company. He nodded. I know. Then why offer? Because I want to see what happens when someone like you stops surviving and starts building. She stood, suddenly angry. Not at him. At herself. At the pull of his voice, the calm of his certainty. At the way he'd always offered just enough to make her stay. You don't know me, Henry. You see what I show you. I see a woman who has nothing to prove. And yet proves something new every day. She stepped back. Don't turn me into a story you want to believe in. He didn't move. Didn't ask her to stay. Just said, I'll never make you a project. She left before she could hear the rest. That night she didn't sleep. She walked the neighborhood until dawn, the city still wet with dew and neon. Her anger gave way to something softer. Not affection. Not yet. But a kind of understanding. He was offering her power. Not romance. Not rescue. Just the tools to step beyond anonymity. And she was terrified of what she might become if she said yes. The next morning, she arrived at the office 10 minutes early. Her inbox had a new message. Subject position. If you're not ready, the offer stays open. If you are, let's talk. Either way, you've earned more than silence. HL. Claire didn't reply. But she saved the message. And when she stepped into the elevator, she noticed for the first time how many people stepped back, giving her space. Not because she asked for it. Because they sensed something different. Something rising. It was a Thursday in March when Claire first heard the rumor. She was poring over spreadsheets in the glass-wall project room when Janelle, a senior consultant 2 doors down, lowered her voice over a call and said, "No, she came from nowhere. Just appeared one day, and now she's running pre-dev for Silver Lake? You don't get that kind of rise without sleeping with someone." Claire didn't flinch. She didn't move. She just kept typing, even as her palms went cold and her throat felt tight. That's how it started. Whispers. Pauses when she entered the room. A laugh cut short. Eyes that looked straight through her one day and burned into her the next. No one ever said anything directly. No one had to. By April, Claire had stopped joining lunches in the break room. She worked late alone. Always the last to leave. She told herself it was easier this way. She didn't owe anyone her story. Didn't need their understanding. She had goals now. Money saved. A future within reach. But one evening, as she was locking up the team's space, she turned a corner and found Henry there, sleeves rolled, tie gone, expression unreadable. "You're still here," he said. "So are you." He studied her. "You heard it." She didn't ask what. She just said, "Yes." He looked away for a moment. Then, quietly, "You want me to make it stop? How? Fire the building?" A ghost of a smile tugged at his mouth. "No. But I could move you to another division. Give you something that gets you out of the gossip's path. And make it look like you're protecting your mistress." He went still. "I'm not," she added. "But that's what they'd say. If they don't already." "You don't deserve this," he said. "You've earned everything." Claire stepped closer, something in her chest coiled too tightly. "I know I earned it. But that doesn't stop people from thinking I slept my way here. From seeing me as a pretty story with a damaged past. You are not a story," he said quietly. "You're the author." She shook her head. "You still don't get it. The problem isn't what I've done. It's what they see. And I can't control that." He moved then, slowly, until there was only half a step between them. Claire. Her name in his voice was something else entirely. Not a command. Not a question. Just a presence. A tether. "I want you to know," he said, "I've never touched you because I respected your work. Not your past. Not your face. Your work." She met his eyes. "But you wanted to." He said nothing. That was answer enough. She looked away. "This is why I didn't call you. That night with the wallet. I knew this would happen. I knew the moment someone powerful looked at me like I was more than luck or pity, I'd lose whatever chance I had at being taken seriously." "You are taken seriously." "Not by them." "Then let them rot," he said. "I don't run this company for people like that." "No," she said, stepping back. "You run this company like a man who's never been on the other side of a locked door." The words hung between them. "I'm not your cause, Henry." "I know." "Then stop acting like you're choosing not to want me out of respect. That's not a boundary. That's denial." He didn't speak. He just nodded once and let her leave. Claire rode the elevator down with her hands in her pockets and her heart somewhere between fury and something far more dangerous. She'd known hunger. Knew cold, and bruises, and silence. But she didn't know what to do with a man who gave her power and then didn't ask for anything back. Because something in her wanted to give it anyway. Not as a reward. As a choice. And that scared her more than anything else. That night she sat in her apartment with the lights off and the windows open, the breeze stirring the stack of project reports on her desk. Outside the city kept humming, a million lives pulsing forward, each unaware of the fracture line forming inside one woman who used to sleep on cardboard. She wasn't falling in love with him. Not yet. But she was falling into something. And it was getting harder to climb out. The promotion came quietly. No announcement. No celebration. Just a new email signature and an updated title on the org chart, Director of Pre-Development, Urban Projects. Claire stared at the screen for a long time. It had been 8 months since she first stepped into Lowell Partners. Less than a year since she'd found his wallet in a gutter. And now this. A title that came with authority. With meetings, budgets, people reporting to her. It was what she'd worked for. And she hadn't asked for it. The appointment had been formalized by the board. Her performance files showed nothing but progress. Not even Henry's fingerprints were on the paper trail. It was, by every metric, legitimate. Which only made it harder. She knew what the office would say. That she was his project. That she had risen because he wanted her clothes. Some of it was whispered already. She felt it in the glances during presentations. In the 2 casual questions from HR about how she was adjusting. And yet, no one ever dared confront her directly. Because her numbers were spotless. Her work was precise. And she never, not once, gave them anything to hold. Until the gala. The annual Lowell Foundation benefit wasn't mandatory. But as a director, attendance was expected. Cocktail attire, investor mingling, and enough press to make everyone careful with their smiles. Claire hadn't planned on going. But 2 days before the event, she received a note in her inbox. From Henry Lowell. Subject the gala. There's no expectation. But I'll be there. And I'd like you to be, too. That was all. She bought a dress the next day. Simple. Dark green. Clean lines. Second-hand, tailored at a Korean seamstress's shop off Wilshire who didn't ask questions and took payment in cash. It wasn't about looking expensive. It was about armor. The kind of presence that said, I know exactly what I'm doing here. And you don't get to define it. When she arrived, the room was already full. Lights dimmed to gold, strings playing in the background, flutes of champagne passing like currency. Claire moved like she belonged, because that's what was required. She smiled without softness. Spoke in deliberate phrases. She was calm. Composed. Until she saw him. Henry stood near the far wall, in conversation with a foreign investor, his tuxedo as sharp as the line of his jaw. But when he saw her, his words paused. And then he smiled. Not the smile he gave the cameras. Not the one he wore at board meetings. This one was different. Smaller. Real. Claire's stomach twisted. He made his way to her slowly, deliberately. People parted without realizing they were making space for something unspoken. You came, he said. I'm here in a professional capacity, she replied. Strictly work. He nodded. Understood. They stood like that for a moment, in a crowd of silk and glass and curated conversation, saying nothing more. Then she said, Why did you really promote me? You're qualified. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters. You know what they think. I do. And you did it anyway. I did. Claire looked away. You shouldn't have invited me. I didn't invite you, he said softly. I asked. There was a difference. And she felt it. Deep in the place where hunger and hope lived side by side. But before she could respond, someone called his name. A donor. A photo op. He didn't move. Claire, he said lower now, so only she could hear. If I was anyone else, if I didn't own the floor under your feet, if I didn't sign every payroll, if I was just a man you met on a train, would you feel the same pull? She didn't look at him. Her voice was steady. If you were anyone else, I might have said yes already. Then she turned and walked toward the mezzanine, leaving her wine untouched and her breath short. That night she didn't sleep. Because she told herself for months she was in control. That she could outthink temptation. That power didn't move her, and admiration wasn't love. But the truth was Messier. And Henry Lowell was no longer a man standing in her way. He was a man standing on the same edge. And she had no idea who would fall first. It happened 2 weeks after the gala. Late. The office was empty. A deadline had kept Claire past midnight, redrafting pitch decks and supplier contracts for a redevelopment project in Echo Park. She hadn't eaten since lunch. Her shoulders ached. Her eyes burned. She didn't hear the elevator until it opened. Henry stepped in like he always did, unrushed, unobtrusive, but unmistakable. "I thought you'd gone home," she said, not looking up. "I could say the same." He walked to the table and scanned the clutter of paper and cold coffee. "You've been here since morning." Claire didn't answer. He crossed the room and placed something beside her elbow. A sandwich. Turkey, no cheese. Her usual. She looked at it. Then at him. "You were watching?" "No," he said simply. "I noticed." She stared at the food, appetite rising against her pride. "This doesn't change anything," she said. "I know. I'm not a charity case. Or a cause. I know that too." She picked up the sandwich. Took one bite. Then another. He didn't sit. Just stood by the window, hands in his pockets, as if something fragile was keeping him in place. And that's when she said it. "I'm tired of being afraid." His head turned slightly. "Of what?" he asked. "Of wanting something I don't know how to survive." The silence that followed was thick. Not with tension. With recognition. He stepped closer. And she didn't stop him. He kissed her like a man used to restraint, but not unfamiliar with ruin. There was nothing tentative. No hesitation. Just heat and quiet, urgency and months of things unsaid breaking open in a single moment. When she kissed him back, it wasn't surrender. It was defiance. Because she had held out for so long. Had refused comfort, resisted softness, denied herself everything that felt even close to safety. But she didn't want to be safe. Not with him. Not anymore. He didn't ask her to stay the night. He didn't ask anything. She left his apartment just before 4 a.m., walking home in a long coat borrowed from his closet, streetlights flickering over the sidewalks like stars on their last breath. She thought she would feel guilt. But what she felt was lighter than that. Like gravity had loosened. Until Monday. Until she walked into the office and saw the looks. Not from Henry. Not from the board. From everyone else. The quiet voices. The narrowed eyes. The nods that weren't quite respectful anymore. No one said a word. They didn't need to. Claire sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began working like nothing had changed. But everything had. By Friday, the press had caught on. A gossip column. One line buried in a business brief. Rumor has it the elusive Mr. Lowell is no longer as solitary as he seems. His new director of pre-development has been spotted leaving his building after hours. She didn't confront him. He didn't address it. For 2 weeks, they operated like colleagues. Nothing more. Nothing less. But in every meeting, every passing glance, every slight pause before she spoke, Claire could feel it. The shift. The question in everyone's eyes, was this how she'd done it? Was this why she mattered? And one morning, she finally asked herself the same thing. She looked in the mirror and didn't see power. She saw doubt. And for the first time in months, she felt poor again. Invisible. Reduced to what they assumed. A girl with a beautiful face and a good story who had ended up exactly where they expected, at the side of a man too wealthy to need love, and too careful to call it what it was. So she did what she hadn't done in years. She ran. She handed in her resignation on a Monday morning. No explanation. No conversation. Just a typed letter on her desk and a message to HR. She was gone before he could call her in. She didn't wait to see his reaction. Because she already knew. He would look calm. He would look composed. And then he would be alone again. Exactly how he'd been before she touched his world. Exactly how she intended to leave him. Claire left the city without fanfare. No press. No scandal. Just a final paycheck and a box of her things shipped to a P.O. box in Topanga Canyon. She used the name Claire Matthews now, her middle name, reshaped into a surname. Clean. Forgettable. She rented a small guest house behind a retired poet's cottage. Cash only. Furnished with mismatched chairs, a stove that ticked when it got too hot, and a window that opened onto trees instead of people. It was the first place she'd ever lived alone that didn't feel like hiding. She slept. 4 days. Without alarm clocks or check-ins or the feeling that someone might come knocking with expectations in their eyes. When she finally woke to stillness, not panic, she knew she'd made the right decision. She started freelance consulting. Small firms. City planning startups. Nonprofits who couldn't afford flash but needed someone to make their systems work. No one cared where she came from. They cared what she could do. And she was good. Not because Henry had trained her, but because she had always been good. Even before she'd had a desk. Even before anyone remembered her name. Months passed. She kept her phone on silent. She never checked the papers. She didn't Google Lowell Partners. And she didn't miss him. Not at first. Not in the loud, desperate way people mean when they say, "I miss you." She missed him the way you miss a door that no longer opens, but still creaks when the wind shifts. She kept the coat, though. The one she wore walking home from his apartment that night. Some things weren't about leaving. Some things were about having been there. One evening in August, nearly 5 months after she walked out, she received an email from a name she didn't recognize. Subject: Project Inquiry. It read simply, "We're launching an affordable housing initiative in East LA and your name came highly recommended. We'd like to meet." There was no mention of where the recommendation had come from. But she knew. Claire showed up anyway. The meeting was at a community center with peeling paint and fresh coffee. No suits. No cameras. Just blueprints, budget drafts, and the kind of urgency that didn't wear makeup. The executive director, a woman in her 50s with a limp and sharp eyes, said, "You're Claire Matthews?" "I am." "You came from big money, didn't you?" "That's what they said." Claire paused. Then smiled slightly. "I came through it. That's different." They hired her that week. And for the first time, she felt what she hadn't even known she wanted: relevance without reputation. Not fame. Not influence. Impact. She spent her mornings reviewing zoning codes and her afternoons walking the lots that would become homes. She wore sneakers now. Carried a thermos instead of a handbag. And when people asked what she used to do, she just said, "Finance." It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. Some evenings, when the air was warm and the sky turned orange behind the canyon trees, she'd sit on her porch with a book and think of him. Not as a lover. Not as a benefactor. Just as a man. One who had given her an opening she hadn't asked for, and a wound she never let bleed. And that was the hardest part to admit. That for all the tension and missteps and misunderstandings, Henry Lowell had never tried to own her. He had only offered. And she had chosen. And now, months later, she was finally living in that choice. Not as his. As hers. He didn't call first. Didn't email. Didn't send a message through someone else. Just showed up at the community build site one Tuesday afternoon, unannounced, in rolled-up sleeves and a pair of boots too clean for the gravel. Claire saw him before he saw her. He stood by the outer fencing, scanning the plans posted on the temp wall. His hair was longer now, threaded with gray at the temples. He looked older, yes, but also sharper. Like someone who had stopped pretending stillness was the same as peace. She walked over without hesitation. "Visiting or scouting investment opportunities?" she asked. He turned. And when he saw her, something in his face broke, only slightly. Like a window cracked from years of pressure. "I heard about the project," he said. "Didn't realize it was yours." "You did." He didn't argue. "I thought maybe I owed you." He stopped. "No. That's not right. Claire waited. I thought maybe I wanted to see if you were okay. She nodded slowly. I am. He looked around. You built something. I built something that doesn't need your name to exist. He smiled faintly. I know. There was a long silence. Workers called out to each other in the background. Dust moved with the breeze. I didn't come to ask for anything, he said finally. I just wanted to see if you were still the person I remembered. I'm not. That made him pause. I'm more than her now, she added. More than the girl who returned your wallet. More than the director you couldn't promote without the world assuming I was yours. You were never mine, he said. I know, she replied. But part of me wanted to be. And that's what scared me. Henry looked away. Not to avoid her, but to collect himself. I've thought about what you said, he murmured. About not knowing how to survive wanting something. And I still don't, he admitted. But I know now I was wrong to think I could give you everything and keep myself separate from it. Claire studied him. For the first time, she didn't feel pulled. She felt settled. Do you regret it? He asked. The job? The night we kissed? Or the part where I walked away? All of it. She considered that. I don't regret the job. It taught me I was capable of more than survival. I don't regret you. I regret that I stayed long enough to question what I already knew about myself. Which was that love shouldn't cost your dignity. He winced. Not from pain, but from recognition. You changed me, Claire. No, she said gently. I gave you a chance to see who you were. You did the rest. He nodded. Took one step back. Not retreat. Respect. I hope this place becomes everything you wanted it to. It already is, she said. He turned to leave. Then paused. Do you still keep the coat? He asked without turning. Claire smiled. It's in the closet. Last thing I unpacked. He nodded once, then walked away. Claire didn't watch him go. She returned to the building plans. The afternoon sun was sharp, bright against the paper. She made a note in the margin, circled a misalignment, then called to one of the contractors. Work to do. Lives to shape. And her own, unfolding now, fully hers. It came on a Thursday morning, in an unmarked envelope. Claire was sorting grant applications in the back office of the community center when the front desk volunteer called her name. There's mail for you. Hand-delivered. She took it without thinking. The paper was heavy. No return address. No logo. Inside was a legal document. 2 pages. Short. Precise. At the top, estate filing, amendment to trust. The name at the bottom froze her where she stood. Henry Lowell. She read the lines twice. Then again. It was real. He had amended his trust 6 weeks ago. The document was notifying her, and only her, that a portion of his holdings, primarily Lowell Partners' philanthropic stake, would be placed in a newly formed entity under her direction upon his death. She stared at the signature. No note. No explanation. Just a legal fact. He had left her a legacy. Quietly. Without warning. Without fanfare. She sat down. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Some clerical confusion. But the details were too specific. The entity name, CM Initiatives, the attached mission language, echoing the words she'd used in that interview months ago. Relevance without reputation. Impact, not image. This wasn't a gift. It was a message. A gesture. Unasked for? Undebated. Henry had done the one thing she never expected from him. He'd made her a part of his story without asking her to return to it. And it ruined her equilibrium. For the rest of the day, Claire moved like someone half-present. She approved construction changes, answered emails, sat through planning meetings, but her thoughts circled back again and again to that envelope. What was he trying to say? Was it guilt? Some attempt at redemption? Or was it, in its strange way, the most honest expression of love he was capable of. That night, she stood barefoot in her kitchen with the document spread on the counter, and a half-drunk mug of tea growing cold beside it. Outside, the canyon was silent. The stars sharp. She didn't cry. But she felt something crack. She hadn't let herself think about him in weeks. Not really. She'd practiced the discipline of letting go. Of not scrolling. Not checking. Not remembering how he looked when he said her name like a question only she could answer. And now here he was again. Not in person. But in permanence. This wasn't a plea to rekindle something. It was a truth he'd left in ink, as unchangeable as a will. Claire took the document and placed it in a drawer, beneath old receipts and warranty slips, the unremarkable paper trail of someone trying to live simply. Then she pulled out her laptop and searched his name for the first time in 6 months. There it was. A photo from the Forbes Gala. Henry, standing beside a new tech founder, smile faint but steady. He looked the same. But his eyes, she saw it instantly, were different. She clicked deeper. An interview. Halfway through, the host asked, "You've stepped back from most day-to-day operations. Any reason why?" Henry had paused. Then, calmly, "Sometimes the most valuable part of building something is realizing it can thrive without you." It was a non-answer. But she understood it. She closed the laptop. Took a breath. And called a number she hadn't used since the day she left. It rang once. Twice. Then, "Lowell." His voice. The same. "It's Claire." A pause. Then, "I know. I got the envelope. I thought you might. Why now?" His answer was immediate. "Because I didn't want you to think what you built here was only possible because of me." Claire went quiet. He continued, "I needed you to know you were never someone I was trying to save. Just someone I wanted to learn from." "That's not what it felt like," she said softly. "I know," he said. "And I'm sorry it took me this long to see that giving doesn't always come with strings. Sometimes it just means stepping out of the way." Claire closed her eyes. "What am I supposed to do with this?" she asked. "Whatever you want. It's yours now." She didn't reply. After a moment, he added, "I won't call again. I didn't ask you to stop." "I know. But I'm learning not to stay where I'm not needed." She opened her mouth. Then stopped. Then said, "You were never unneeded. Just unsustainable." There was a breath. Something like a laugh, not bitter, not sharp. "Goodbye, Claire." And then the line went dead. She held the phone for a long time, listening to the absence of his voice. Then she put it down. And didn't cry. But she did not sleep. 3 weeks later, Claire stood on the roof of a finished housing unit in East LA, overlooking the city that had once swallowed her whole. The sun was high. The building beneath her was humming, workers painting trim, landscapers planting drought-resistant trees along the fence. Somewhere below, children laughed, already claiming the courtyard as their own. She stood still. Watching. Not waiting. The project was nearly complete. Her team was preparing for the ribbon cutting. Local officials would come. Photos would be taken. But Claire wouldn't be on the stage. Her name wouldn't be on the plaque. That had been part of her condition, anonymity not as modesty, but as design. Let the building speak for itself. Let the people living inside it write the story next. She thought about the envelope again. It still sat in the drawer, untouched since the call. She hadn't filed anything. Hadn't accepted or declined. The trust wasn't due to activate until his death, a detail that made the gesture more symbolic than legal. A man's way of saying something he didn't know how to say in person. She hadn't heard from him since. And she didn't expect to. What could either of them say that would add anything now? He had given her something final, not wealth, not status, but recognition. The rare kind that didn't ask for gratitude in return. And she had returned it by not calling again. Not asking for more. Not coming back. She walked to the edge of the roof and leaned against the railing. Below her, The streets ran in lines that had once felt like escape routes. Now they felt like arteries, pulsing with something more important than money or influence. Meaning. Not borrowed. Not given. Built. She checked her watch. At noon, she had a meeting with a family of 4 set to move into one of the units. The mother worked 2 jobs. The father had a disability claim pending. Their youngest child had drawn a picture of their new home during last week's site visit, a wonky building with big windows and a tree that didn't quite fit on the page. Claire had pinned it above her desk. When she returned to the office, the envelope from Henry was still there. She opened the drawer, pulled it out, held it for a moment. Then she slid it into a folder marked Archive, labeled it with the date, and tucked it away in the cabinet behind her desk. Done. No rage. No ache. Just a clean ending to a story that had nearly rewritten her. She opened her laptop. Typed a proposal. Answered a grant inquiry. Ordered fresh materials for the community garden's next phase. The ordinary details of someone choosing, every day, to be present. At 12:03, she heard a knock at the office door. The family was early. Claire stood. Smoothed her shirt. Opened the door. A boy of 6 peered up at her with wide eyes. "Are you the builder?" he asked. She knelt slightly to meet him. Smiled. "No," she said. "I'm just someone who helped make sure you could come home." The boy nodded, solemn as a judge. "Thank you," he said, and offered her a drawing, another house, this one with a sun and a smiling woman in the window. Claire took it carefully. "You're welcome." Behind the boy, the mother smiled. The father nodded his thanks. Claire stepped aside and let them in. The door closed gently behind them. And for the first time in years, she felt it, not safety. Not security. Something quieter. Peace. Not because the story ended the way she once imagined, but because she had found her place outside of it.